Back to the Sons of the American Legion Radio Report on WVOX AM 1460.
Jack, get on that mic.
WVOX.
That was my fault.
We have a special guest coming up on the line, but first, here's Ken.
Hey, thanks, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone listening to Sons of the American Legion Radio here on WVOX 1460 New Rochelle. And one of the things that we've been talking about after the January 8th attack by Iran using missiles on a U.S. base in Iraq was where were the Patriot defense missiles, which is a long-standing defense system that the U.S. uses and shares with its allies to defend bases and borders and countries. And writing about this last week was Aaron Mehta, who is a deputy editor and senior Pentagon correspondent for Defense News. Aaron, how are you today?
I'm good, Ken. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thanks so much for joining us. Maybe if you could start your talk a little bit about what is the Patriot missile defense. It's been around for a while, I think 17 years. It's updated. It's shared with a bunch of allies, made by Raytheon. If you could tell us a little bit about the Patriot missile system.
Yeah, so the Patriot's one of kind of the core missile defensive systems in the U.S. arsenal. As you said, it's also sold to allies and partners. It's an expensive piece of equipment. It's large, but essentially the goal is you have these things, you put them in your country aimed at potential threat, and if they launch something at you, for instance, say Iranian ballistic missiles, you have the chance to, if everything works right, to intercept those missiles before they can get in range of damaging whether it's infrastructure or your personnel. It's kind of the, just for lack of a better term, almost basic missile defense system that people say, okay, if we need to have a system to defend against enemy missiles in the region, Patriot's kind of the go-to if you're buying from America. Russia, of course, has its own system, which is its own tangle of webs. But for America and its allies, the Patriot's kind of the first choice.
Yeah, we've talked over the years about ballistic missile defense. Something actually Admiral Greener brought up to us at the commissioning of a Navy destroyer in New York City 7 or 8 years ago. And but this is something that's been used various places to defend a border. Tell us a little bit. You were at the Pentagon on Thursday for a press conference at the Secretary of Defense Mark Esper and the chief and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that press conference, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. The two of them came out, and occasionally they will do these kind of joint press conferences. A lot of times, sometimes it's for specific issues. For instance, after the Soleimani strike, they came out and talked to us. In other cases, and this was one of those cases, it's more just a general touch point with the American public. We like the fact that they started doing that again. Those had stopped under Secretary Mattis and under Acting Secretary of Defense Pat Shanahan. So we're happy to see that the two marks, as they get called around the Pentagon, Esper and Milley, are going out and again talking to the American public a little bit. So they came out there, they started to basically take questions, and somebody asked the reasonable question of, after the strikes from Iran, people were wondering why were there not Patriot batteries in Iraq? There used to be Patriot batteries in Iraq. And in fact, we actually moved a couple of Patriot systems into Saudi Arabia last year, specifically because of concerns about the Iranian threat. You'll remember that there was a kind of combined missile and drone attack on a Saudi oil company last year. And so after that, we moved a Patriot system in. Their response was, look, there's two issues. The first is logistical. A Patriot battalion is made up of several kind of Patriot batteries. Can have as many as 600 soldiers. Wow. And you have to figure out, where to move those guys, where to place them, kind of logistically, okay, if Iran's over in this direction, where do we want to put this thing? That's the easy one. The trickier one is the legal question. And this is the thing that, a lot of folks forget, is that we are in Iraq at the request and permission of the Iraqi government. Iraq is a sovereign nation. If we're putting our forces there, we need the Iraqis to say, okay, we welcome you in, or to actively request, please give us this. Right now, because of politics in Iraq, that's not so easy to do. And according to Esper and Milley, they want to move a Patriot battery into Iraq, and the Iraqi government so far has not given the permission for that to happen.
Well, it's concerning to hear that we can't adequately defend our soldiers who are in Iraq. There was Richard Engel of NBC was in Iraq last week, and he went to some of the bases that were hit by the missiles and showed the craters that were from these 1,000-pound warheads. The impact they made, and they were very close to operational areas, barracks, and apparently what saved them really from any more serious injuries than the TBI cases that have been documented is they must have gotten notice to go to the shelters that are underground there. How does that work? Is that kind of what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of reporting that's been done that the U.S. either directly or indirectly through their Iraqi partners, and remember, this is actually an Iraqi base. The U.S. kind of commands part of it, but it's technically an Iraqi base that was hit. That the Iraqis perhaps were given notice by Iran saying, hey, we're going to do this. The kind of officially on record, people have said no, that we found out the strikes were coming because of our early warning equipment. And certainly there's plenty of US-based satellites and other systems that their job is to track missile launches, and they certainly would have been geared towards Iran, given the situation at the time. Remember, the U.S. had struck and killed Soleimani and the Iranian general in Iraq. The expectation was there would be some sort of retaliation from Iran. Certainly the U.S. had its equipment geared towards Iran. It was checking everything to make sure signs of the launch were coming. That said, General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said specifically he believed this was an attempt by Iranians to kill U.S. forces. That didn't happen. Thankfully, everyone was able to stay relatively safe. We do have this ongoing issue with concussions, TBI, which we're seeing the numbers continue to fluctuate, which makes sense because these are issues that can crop up later on. But effectively, nobody lost limbs, nobody lost life. That's a great thing. Milley says this was still an attempt to kill U.S. troops. It didn't happen. Other folks have posited that between potential early warning from Iran and some of the targeting that was done, that maybe Iran was trying to avoid U.S. casualties. I tend to fall somewhere in the middle, frankly, that the Iranians are not upset there were no U.S. casualties. I don't think they were hoping they would kill a whole bunch of Americans at once, but they certainly were trying to send a message. And you don't drop 1,000 or 2,000-pound ballistic missiles on somebody and hope that everything worked out because you don't want casualties. You can't accept casualties. You don't use those weapons on and have that kind of risk that something can go wrong if you're not willing to at least say, okay, this might end up killing some of the people that we're aiming at.
Well, that's my concern about, are we adequately protecting our soldiers and military members and the civilian contractors that support them in Iraq? Let me ask you, what's the perception on the accuracy, the ability of the Patriot missile system to intercept missiles? Apparently, in this case, there were 16 missiles sent at Iraq and the bases there. Is there a perception about how effective the system is?
Yeah, people who are certainly proponents of it say it's totally accurate. It's a great system. I think the more realistic view is it's pretty good. The issue is you never want to be on the ground in the moment when the pretty good isn't 100% accurate. Any sort of missile defense, whether it's low-level ballistic missiles like these or talking about trying to intercept an ICBM in orbit, it's really hard. The comparison we hear a lot is you're trying to hit a missile with a bullet with a bullet. So it's tricky. Nothing's perfect. Even, again, people who are realistic about this will say it's not perfect. But it's pretty good. And there's a good chance that had there been a Patriot system there, at least some of these missiles would have been taken out by it.
Hey, just a quick, we're going to have you back because I got another question for you. But tell us about your background. How did you get into writing about the defense industry?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a reporter in D.C. for about 11 years now. And about 7 years ago, started working for Defense News covering the Air Force very closely, doing kind of both industry and strategy, policy, tactics, things like that. And about 4 years into that career, got shifted up to what we call the Pentagon job, which is what I do now, which is covering things at kind of the highest level. Defense News, which you can find at defensenews.com.
Sure.
We cover these issues from a wide range of perspectives, including internationally. and it's never boring. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Aaron, we got to go. Deputy Editor, Senior Pentagon Correspondent for Defense News. Thank you so much for joining us and offering your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
You've been listening to the Sons of the American Legion Radio Report on WVOX AM 1460 and heard around the world on WVOX.com. We thank today's special guest, Aaron Mehta, Senior Pentagon Correspondent for Defense News. Remember to check out our Facebook page, Sons of the American Legion Radio, our Sea Sources page, and our West Point Football Report page. And until next week, remember to thank a veteran.